Let's begin. We're up to the Mishnah and Daf Chav Zayin, Abed Aleph, Kumlan Ablat Gemara. The Mishnah says. So we're continuing to talk about the kaimitz and the leftover, the balance of the mincha. It is not enough left, and so on. So the Mishnah says. The last Mishnah we learned where the Shirayim went missing, and the kaimitz part of it went missing. Mm-hmm. He continued that hakaimitz miutoy ma'akev esrubai. Hakaimitz, even the minutest amount is missing from the kaimitz, and the bulk of it is still there. You cannot proceed with it. It's possible. Then he says isarim. We're going to list a whole bunch of different things where they share a common psul. Isarim. That's the minimum amount, a measure of flour that you can use to make a mincha. Is miyutay ma'akev esrubai. A minutest amount prevents you, even though the bulk is still there, you cannot proceed with the entire mincha. Hayayin, the wine that you use for the libations, miyutay ma'akev esrubai. Now the wine, it depends what kind of animal it is. If it's a par, if it's let's say a bull or an ox, you have over there 6 legin. If it's a ram, you bring 4 legin. And if it's a sheep, it's 3 legin. Wine and oil have the same quantities. So, yain, wine, miyutim a little bit, it holds back. Ma'akev prevents you from being yaitz, even though the bulk is still there. The same thing with shemen. Miyutim ma'akev rubai. Slightest amount missing, it's a problem. We're doing the Mishnah of Chozayin Amud Aleph. And that is, we're talking about if any part of the measure is missing, it's disqualified. Hasoilis, the flour, bahashemin, and the oil, ma'akvin zeh. So the mincha has 2 components, flour and oil. If either one is missing, the carbon is not kosher. Hakoimitz v'alavayna. The same thing is when you have the kmitza. You have the kmitza, and you have to put that on the mizbeach. And you also have the frank incense. You put on the mizbeach. Ma'akvin zeh. Either one is missing, it's not valid. We're not Chav Zayin. We just finished the Mishnah, and we talked about each part, each component. If it doesn't have the full measure, it is possible. So now we're going to bring down the sources for us. Up to the Gemara. Thinking about my timer. What's the reason? Why do you say if it's missing at all from the kaimitz it is possible? Because the pasuk says maloi kamsa. It has to be a full hand. And now we have a rule by kachim that if it only says it once in the Torah, we say it's only a mitzvah. It's an ideal thing. If it's mentioned, repeated twice, and one of them is superfluous, we say shon olav akosel. If it's said there, in order to tell you this is the only way to do it, because it says malay kamsa, a fistful, trei zimna, or 3 fingers full. Trei, it says twice. Therefore, we know that if the minutest part amount is missing, it's not valid. Isarain. The same thing by Yisrael, me'utay ma'akev esrubai. You just said that the full measure of a mincha, the minimum amount is Yisrael. If anything is missing, it's not my time was the reason across. Says the pasuk misalsa. Doesn't have to repeat it twice because it says from it was missing. It's not kosher. And the minutest amount, it is possible. This is from the extra letter hey, from the word salsa. Hayayin, the wine, if slice amount is missing, it's possible because it says kocha. It says in the pasuk over there, kocha, by the Nesachim, it says kocha yasa l'shoy, kocha, like this. No, this has to be followed. This is a prescription and has to be followed exact. Hashemin miyutim ma'akev rubai, the minchas Nesachim, because minchas Nesachim kocha. Minchas nedava and minchas nedava. Omakro, it says in the pasuk, umishmana, from its oil. Sheimchas kosher psula. So we see over there. So because it says mishmana from its oil, extra hay, to tell you that the full oil has to be there. Hashemen v'haseilas ma'akvin ze'ezer. The oil, the 2 components of the mincha, the oil and the flour. And if either one is missing, it's ma'akev each other. How do we know that? But the pasuk says misalsa umishmana. It says from its flour and from its oil. So therefore, you need both of them together. And then migarsa umishmana. And then it says migarsa umishmana because it says again the same thing twice. How do you know that you need both components? When it comes to only one of them, we said the extra hay tells you it has to be the full amount of flour, the full amount of oil. But how do you know that if you have only the oil, you have the full amount of oil, but you don't have the flour, let's say, you can't proceed and call it a mincha, whatever, because it says twice. One part, it says first from the oil and from its flour, and then it says again, migarso mishmana, from its fine flour, and from shamna, from its oil. So we said because it says twice, the second time tells you that it has to be done this way, no other way. When it comes to the kmitzi, you also have to make sure you have a levine as well. Either kmitzi is no good because al kol levinosa, there's kol levin asher al mincha. Because it says in the pasuk that al kol, it has to be the entire levina, and then it says again in another pasuk you should bring the kaimitz ve'eis kol levina al mincha. It says the second time the entire levina because it says it twice. We know that it has to be, otherwise you're not yetzer.
Sorry, so you need the kaimits, you need the oil. Do you need the wine? Is that a...
No. For the mincha, the wine was talking about when you bring a carbon, you bring a flour offering with it, and you also bring wine and oil with a carbon. Now we're talking about oil is within the mincha itself. The flour offering itself is made up of three components: flour, oil, and then the levina, the frankincense you put on top.
And you need all three.
You need all three, and any of them missing is not kosher. We brought these different psukim, and because it repeats it twice, so we know that it has to be done this way. Now, the next Mishnah continues with other things that are made up of a few components. You need to make sure that all the components are there. Says the Mishnah. Today, you can put in 2 goats in Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, you have 2 goats, right? One is the korban chatas, and one gets tossed off the cliff. If you brought only one without the other, you haven't done the mitzvah. It's not you're not yetzer. Shnei kivshat said is the 2 sheep, the lambs of Shavuos. Remember, you bring 2 lambs, then you bring 2 loaves of bread, and this enables you to start bringing the new wheat on the mizbech. You can't just bring one lamb; you got to bring both lambs. Beis chalas makazu. You can't just bring 1 loaf of bread; you have to bring 2 loaves of bread baked. Neis dori makazu. By lechem aponim, you have 2 rows of 6. You need both rows of 6. You can't just have one. Shnei bazichim makazu. Top of the lechem aponim, you have these 2 spoons on each side. You have a spoon. Inside there's also the levin, the frankincense. You need them both. Hasdorin bazichim makazu. And if you're missing the bazichin, then you're not yoitze with the dorim either. No, it's not 2 components. The chalus, the 12 chalus, and you have the 2 bazichin, the 2 spoons that have the levain inside. They're critical. They're both important. Beis minim shebnazir, the 2 kinds of matzahs that are by a nazir, or a nazir at the end has to bring 2 kinds of matzahs, or the gimel. The 3 things by paraduma, which is you have the 8 erez, which is the cedar tree, and then you have the eza, which is the hyssop, and the shnisalas and the red thread, and the dalid. So these are the 3. All 3 components are necessary. If any of them are missing, you're not yetzer. Dalid shebetoida by toida, you have 4 different kinds of chalus. They're all necessary. The dalid shebelulav, by lulav you have the lulav, the esrog, the hodas, and the arava. They are all necessary. And we are in the middle of the Mishnah of Chav Zayin Amar Aleph, and we're going through a list of things, and as the Gemara will explain each one, that if something made of a few components, all the components are necessary. Ba'arba shebe mitzayra, and so too by a mitzayra, you have 4 different parts. You have again by a mitzayra, you have the 8 erez, you have the cedar tree, and you have the shnisalas, and you have the what do you call it? And the Aza and the Hyssop, but you also have the bird. You also have the pigeons that you have to have. So these 4, all 4 of them are necessary for Mitzvah before the Mitzvah comes back to the community and can you catch them again. No matter how many components you have, each component is critical. Shiva Hazoyed Shabapara, that you by the parad and the Adoma, you have to spray 7 times towards the Beis Hamikdash. You need to make sure you spray all 7 times. Ma'akvazuzu, 6, 5 won't do. Zayin Hazoyish Haben Abana. You spray in the Kodesh Kadoshim facing, and you then go in the main room there, the Heichel, and you spray towards the Pereiches. You need all 7. Mizbeach Hazov, and then you spray on the Mizbeach Hazov, Ma'akvazuzu. And whether this is talking about Yom Kippur, whether we're talking about the Par Helam Dova Shal Tzibur of the entire community committed a sin based on the test, based on a ruling from a bezin turned out to be wrong, and they have to bring the same carbon, to bring a carbon, they have to spray. You need to make sure you spray all the times that are necessary. But now the Gemara goes through each case. Shnei, you can put two coats. You keep them because they prevent each other from yaitza. How do you know that? Because chukah, it says says by Yom Kippur, it says generally the word chukah, and therefore we know that all the activities on Yom Kippur have to be done because chuk means this is how it's done. There's no way of circumnavigating it. Shnei kivs said is the two lambs of Shavuos. You need to make sure you bring both lambs. Why? Because it says Havaya. It says in the pasuk Yiyu, which therefore means that it has to be done this way, and there's no other way. Whenever it says Yiyu, Tiyena, it means this is how it has to be done, and there's no way of getting around it. Okay, then it says here, Shtei Chalos, the two Chalos of Shavuos are the same thing. Havaya, it says there again, Tiyena, so we know it has to be this way. Shnei Zdorin, the two Zdorin or the Lechem Aponim, how do we know that? Because Chukah. It says there again, but it says the word Chukah there by the Lechem Aponim. Whenever it says these words, Chukah or Tiyen and all that, we know it means this is the only way it can be done and no other way. Okay. Shnei Bazichin, the two Bazichin that go on top of Lechem Aponim, again, because it says Chukah. Because it says Chukah, and this word again has to be done this way. Hasedorin v'habazichin, we said the two parts of the lechem haponim, the bread and the bazichin on top. Again, because it says chukah, it means this has to be done, and there's no other way of doing it. It says chok olam. By the lechem haponim, it says misha Hashem chok olam. Shnei mina shebenazir, the two kinds of matzah by another. The chsiv, it says kain yasa. When it tells you what to do, it says kain yasa. This is how it has to be done. Kain yasa toidos nizar. This has to be done, so there's no other way around it. Gimel shebepara, the three parts of the three components that you have to add to a paraduma, which you said before, the 8 sides of the series, and all that. Because again, it says there's chukas atayra, chukah. Abar shebetoida, how do you know by a toida the 4 different matzahs? If you don't bring all 4, you're not yaitza. The iskis lenazir, it's compared to a nazir. Where do you find that? The chsiv, because it says in pasuk. Al chalis lechem chavitz. It says in pasuk, sorry. Al zevach toidas shlomov. That you bring this on top of the carbon toidas shlomov, and we're talking about over there of the nazir. So we see where the chalos lechem chametz is compared to a nazir. By carbon toidas is compared to a nazir. Now what? Just like a nazir, it has to be done. All parts have to be brought up. Same thing here. It comes to include shalmei nazir. The 4 parts of Mitzvah, the 3 like the paraduma plus the bird. The chsiv, because it says zois tia teidas ha-mitzvah. Zois tia, this is how it has to be done. The dalet shebelulav. So you have a lulav, an asterisk, the hadas, and the arava. And if you're missing any of them, you're not yaitze. Why? Because lekachtem lekichatama. It says in the pasuk lekachtem lachem pri eitz hada. Lekachtem is made up of 2 words. Lokach Tama. You should bring it complete, all of it, whole. You have to bring all 4 parts. Omar Rav Chanan bar Rava said that lo yishanu ela she'ein. It's only talking about if you don't have, if you're missing. Avol yesh lo ein ma'akim. If you have, it doesn't matter. What do you mean doesn't matter? So being what exactly it doesn't mean. According to Rabbeinu Tam, what it means is that if you have all 4, even though they're not tied together, you don't make the kesher around it, it's good enough. But you still have to take them all at the same time. The Bahag, however, learns that Yesh Le'emak means you can take the lulav in the morning, pick up the esrog an hour later, pick up the hadas. Not only can you do separately, but you can do separate times as well. You can do them all separately. Meisha, I'll ask you a question. A brisa which really belongs in Masechta Sukkah, but it's never brought in Masechta Sukkah, even though we have the whole discussion about that. But this brisa is not mentioned only here, which I always wondered why. Meisha, I'll ask you a question. This is what the brisa says. Dalet minish lulav, the 4 species of lulav, beis mehenois and peidas, 2 of them bear fruits, which is the these, the dates and the And basement there's a pay. The two of them don't. The willow and the myrtle, they don't have fruits. Ha'is and pay to the lulav that bear fruits should be connected with those that don't. And those that don't have should be connected to the ones that do. So you're not yaitz until you tie them all together and they're joined together. This idea of unity is also applies to Yisrael. Yidden, when they're fasting because they're at terrible times, and you're asking Hashem for help, you need to make sure that the community is bonded together. So when you pray to Hashem, Yidden should be united. Remember it says, it builds up in heaven. Upper stories, but they have to be united on the ground. So and that's why, in fact, it says you have to have a tzibur. And the word tzibur, which is a community, is Rosh Tevis Tzadik Beini Berosha. Everyone has to be there together. Everyone's joined together. But what do we see from here? That clearly that all the parts have to be together. You're telling me that you can be separate. That's what Abchana Barava said. It says clearly the Brai say that you have to be aguda. They have to be tied up. Again, interesting. This Brai is not brought in Sukkah. So you want to answer it, and the next Brai is Tanai. So the Tanya we learned, one opinion says lulav bein agud bein she'ein agud kosher. The Rabbanan said they don't have to be tied. And Yudah says agud kosher, she'ein agud possible. If it's tied, good. If it's not tied, it's possible. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the logic of Rabbi Yehuda? Garmat. He learns out kicha ma'agudas ezer. He learns out the word lekachtem lechem here. He learns out from kicha, which is written by the Paraduma by agudas ezer. It says that you should take the Agudas Ezov and it's by the Korban Pesach. It says you should take the Agud Lekachtem, you should take Agudas Ezov, you dip it into the blood, and you sprinkle it on your doorpost and on your lintel, and don't leave the house. We learn out Gama Kicha Kicha. We learn out Kicha Kicha Ma'agudas Ezov, Ma'alahala Ma'aguda Avkam Ma'aguda. He says just like over there, it has to be tied up. And I'm actually mixing up. Some other paraduma have to be tied together. Just like the paraduma have to be tied together, so too over here, it has to be tied together. Sorry, say it again. We're not talking about paraduma, we're talking about Pesach. But by Pesach, you have to have a gudas ezer that has to be tied together, and then you sprinkle the blood on your doorposts, on your lintels. So the same thing over here, by the lulav, it has to be all tied together. The kachtem, it has to be all tied together. Is mala halabagud of kamagud. Just like over there, it's tied together. Over here also, it has to be tied together. Rabbanon legam kicha kicha. Rabbanon, they don't believe in the Gzei Shava, because Gzei Shava, you have to hear from your Rebbe. They never heard of Gzei Shava. Kaman Ozla Hadatanya. So tell me. So you have one opinion. Yehuda says that you have to have all the minim tied together. The Chacham say they don't have to be tied at all. So who's also the following brisa, which seems to sort of be in between? He says lulav mitzvah. Ideally, you should tie them together. But you didn't use kosher. Come on, who's author? Rabbi Yehuda my kosher. Good if you didn't tie them together, it's not even kosher. And Rabbanan my mitzvah. What do you mean? Why should you have to tie together? Rabbanan you don't have to. So we answer Rabbanan. My mitzvah. The mitzvah is from the kelim of you, which you beautify and enhance your mitzvahs. Taisus has an interesting discussion. We started out by saying lekachtem means lekicha tama. It should be a whole that all the minim should be put together. We learn out from lekachtem also that the esrig, for example, is not allowed to be missing any parts. But the din is that those dinim only apply to the first day Yom Tov, some say the second day Yom Tov, the Chutz La'aretz, but not the Chalamoid. The Chalamoid, if part of the esrig is missing, is still kosher. So Taisus asks, he brings there's one opinion that says, so all the dinim you learn from lekachtem don't apply to the second day of Yom Tov. So therefore, he says here that that the second day Yom Tov, you don't need 4 minim. You can only have the lulav v'yotzer, because you're telling me you learn out the 4 minim from the kachtem lekichatama. Since when it comes to a whole esrog, we say chalamoid doesn't matter. So too on chalamoid says Taisus, there's an opinion that says if you only have the lulav, only the hadas, your yotzer mitzvah lulav, you don't need any more. And the Taisus, going to one version, that they also would hold all you need is one person to make the bracha lulav for the whole city. Because lekachtem, we learn out lekachtem, every person should take it. But anything to do with tem only applies to the first day Yom Tov. So therefore, it says Taisus, according to them, they probably would hold that one person can do it per city, and Taisus completely discredits them, and he says no such thing. And of course, you have to every person has to make a bracha. You have to have all 4 species. Only when it comes to the esrog itself do we say if it's missing chalamoid, it's b'diavad it's yotzer.
Does that mean if the breaks?
Sorry?
Breaks? If the piton breaks, it means it's all right after the second day, or
Following that logic, the piton breaks is I guess you would say following that logic that b'di'evet maybe you'd be yaitze the chalmud. It's only the first day that you're not yaitze because chaser is I guess yeah b'di'evet I think you're right. Says the Gemara. Sheva hazoyshim par bakazuzu. The seven sprays in the parah is ma'ak of each other. Why? Because it says chukah. Again, on Yom Kippur, it says about paradum. It says there's chukah Torah. So all seven. Sheva zoyshim beina badim. On Yom Kippur, you have to sprinkle beina badim. Or shamas bechazov. They have to sprinkle in bechazov. Or shala pareichis. All these other kabbanas, including Yom Kippur or the par helm davar. You spray in the pareichis. Is ma'ak v'zuzu. Why? How do you know? So you go through each one. Then you put him. It says chukah. Yeah, it says there by Yom Kippur. It says the word chukah. So therefore, we know that this is how it has to be, and there's no alternative. It says the par Mashiach and the par helm davar shel tzibur the sir the chadim. We learned how do you know all of these different parts? Because it says also la par kash also la par. You should do to the par helm davar shel tzibur like you did to the par Mashiach, and so on. Now, and then the Torah repeats by the par, Helam, Dover, Shal Tzibur, the entire community made a mistake. The Torah says, do it like the par of the Kohen Mashiach, he made a mistake. But then Torah itemizes every single thing you do. So what's the point of saying, do it like the par Kohen Mashiach when he tells anyway what to do? So we say it's all repeated again to tell you Tanya. But like we learned the Brisa, also the par, also the par, what is the point telling you? He's trying to tell you here, lichfor bahazoyis. He's repeating it twice here. The idea of spraying, because I'm going to tell you that's a klum. Because when the Torah repeats something twice, you know that it's missing. The seven hazoy bein shaloi lishmon. Whether you did it and you did not have in mind the right carbon. Remember, we learned in the beginning as well by carbon chatas. If you had loy lishmon, if you didn't have the right kavanah, the whole carbon is possible. So this part of here is called a chatas. So if you did not have lishmon, or bein shaloi mechovanas, you didn't spray it in the right direction towards the base of English, which is unless we the psul apostle. But ushebefnim, however, those kabbanas that are done on the inside, or mitzayda, or by mitzayda, shalai lishman. If they didn't were done lishman psula. Again, same thing. If you had the wrong kabban, but shalai mechavanas, he didn't spring them in the right direction. Ksheitis. So here, more explains. But Tanya, we learned in a Braisa Gabi Pora by Pora Duma as well. Shaloi lishma psulut, but shaloi mechoing shadis. We have a contradiction. Before you said by Pora Duma, if you did says you did not spray the right direction, it is kosher. How could it be kosher? Says the Gemara, it's not a problem. Ha Rabbi Yehuda, ha Rabbanan. There's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan. And it's a lengthy argument, but they're arguing in this point here as well. The technicality. What's the argument here? Very interesting. The time of the Braisa mechutz kapara. So you have people that are tamei and they went to the mikveh and then they went for sunset and they still cannot participate until they go ahead and they bring their carbon in the morning. It's called a mechutz kapara. So mechutz kapara. Shanich Lazara went into the Azara b'shoigig by mistake is chayiv chatas. The chayiv chatas, but made it deliberately on his karas because they didn't bring the kapara. They're still tummy, and you're tummy. The person is allowed to walk inside the Beis Hamikdash. The ain't sort of claimers. This here we're talking about somebody who already went to the mikveh and somebody already went who had sunset. The only thing is, he didn't bring his carbon. So surely Tvul Yom, somebody who did not even wait for sunset, surely B'Sharkos may surely the same thing. Then he says to Tahirim, those koinim that are Tahir, shenichnasu lifnim mechitzasim. They went inside. There's there's 11 amas where well it could be talking about a Yisro. where it sounds like from Rashi, we're talking about Yisrael there, because you have, when you walk up the steps, you're coming from the east entrance, you're walking up the steps. The first, there's 22 amas there, from the entrance to the Heichel, to the actual sanctuary. First 11 amas is called Ezras Yisrael, and the next 11 amas is Ezras Kainim. And Rashi says here that you went beyond the Mechitz, you went beyond 11 amas, so it sounds like we're talking about the Yisrael. Or he went beyond the 11 amos into the base of Mikdash. He was about a coin, but he had no purpose to be the base of Mikdash. Lehechel is kulai ba'ar. So if you walked into the entire Hechel ba'ar boim, you get 40 lashes or 39 lashes. Why? Because we'll soon see. It says you should not enter the base of Mikdash. And then the pasuk says, "What happens?" Sorry, we get to the pasuk in a minute. Base la paroiches. If he walked into the kodesh hakadoshim, and furthermore, pnei kapoides, he walked directly to the oil, right to the oren, right standing before the oren. Then you get misa. Then you get not only lash, you get misa. Rabbi Yehuda says he disagrees. He says kol hechel kuloi. Rabbi Yehuda says the entire Beis Hamikdash, including the Beis, even if you walked into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, you only get Aboim, 39 lashes. When are you chayiv misa? Vel pnei hakapoides. Only if you're standing mamish by the Oren, then be misa. But my kamifke, what's going on here? What's the argument? By Kro, they're arguing, how do you understand this pasuk? The pasuk mentions 3 different stations. Moshe, speak to Aaron, your brother. Number 1. He should not enter the Beis Hamikdash. So that's number 1. Then it says Beis LaPareiches. That's inside, beyond the Pareiches. That's in the Kodesh Kodesh, Holy of Holies. And then it says El Pnei HaKapaides. And then he says right before the Aron, Asher al Aron, v'lo yamas, he won't die. So the first part of the pasuk is Va'al Yavik, which is merely a sin, a lav, and for that you get lashes. The very end of the pasuk says v'lo yamas, you're going to die. So the very last thing is standing by the Aron, you will die. The very first one, entering the Beis Hamikdash, when you don't have to, you get malchus. The question is Beis LaPareiches, which means when you enter the Kodesh Kodashim, does that belong in the first half of the pasuk where you get lashes, or does that belong in the second half of the pasuk where you die? Is Rabbanon? So Rabbanon learn Ela Kodesh, only Ela Kodesh below Yaveh. But the Beis LaPareiches, once you walk in the Kodesh Kodashim, there's below Yamas. There you will die if you walk in. Rabbi Yehuda Saba, no. He says Ela Kodesh and Beis LaPareiches fall under below Yaveh. You get lashes. Only the El Pnei Kapoides below Yamas. Only went to the Aron, you say the word that you chayiv below Yamas. That's when you get chorus. My time with the Rabban. Let's analyze each one. Why do they learn the way they learn? I want to say very simple. Because if you follow Rabbi Yehuda's way of learning, Lichter Brachman, let the Torah write, El HaKodesh, let the Torah write, you get a lav for Kodesh, for walking into the Beis Hamikdash, and then say, the El Pnei Kapoides, but if you walk into Kodesh Kodashim, you get Misa. Why mention the third case standing in front of the Aron? What does that add? If you're going to get Misa for walking the Kodesh Kodashim, so surely you're going to get Misa for the Aron. In fact, you can't get to the Aron without walking into Kodesh Kodashim. But I would say, the base of I would say, if the Heichel Mechayev, sorry. So this is what they're saying. If Rabbi Yehuda is right that what do you call it? That Beis LaPareiches is the only time you get misa, only when you're standing by the Aron, and not when you walk into Kodesh Kodashim, then why mention Kodesh Kodashim at all? All the Torah have to say is don't walk into the Heichel, you get lashes. But if you're standing by the Aron, you'll get misa, and then I'll automatically know. And if you walk into the Kodesh Kodashim, you get lashes. Because if the Heichel you get lashes, surely in the Kodesh Kodashim. And the Torah clearly says the only time you get misa is up Pnei HaKapaides, when you're standing right by the Aron. So why does the Torah have to include also the middle case, according to Rabbi Yehuda? I would say Heichel Mechayev. If the Heichel you get lashes, surely you're not allowed to stand there. The Beis HaPareiches, the Kosher Rachman. Why does the Torah have to include that as well? Shmuel must be to tell you that Beis HaPareiches is a different din than the front of the antechamber than the Heichel. Tell you from that point onwards, you get misa. His question is, so why the mention that you're standing by the Aron? If you're really getting misa for walking the Kodesh Kodashim, why go to the Aron? We'll see in a minute. Rabbi Yehuda will say exactly that point. If the Torah were written El HaKodesh, and would not have written the base lapareiches, like you're asking. I mean, I would have thought my kodesh, when the Torah says don't walk in al yovim b'chol eisel kodesh, and then the next case is standing by the aron. You know what I would say? Kodesh means the kodesh kodashim. I would say only if you walk to kodesh kodashim you get a lab, but if you walk into the base hamikdash itself, the heichel, maybe not nothing. Abel heichel lav namiloi. Therefore, the Torah has to tell you get a lab there as well. But Rabbanon say that that's not an argument. You cannot say that. The Heichel Kula Ikar Kodesh. Everyone knows that Kodesh is not limited to Kodesh HaKadoshim. The entire Heichel is called Kodesh. Remember, it says the Ivdila HaPareich is that this Pareich should separate, this curtain should separate Lachem to you, Bein HaKodesh or Bein Kodesh HaKadoshim. So it's called Kodesh. So if the Torah says Al Yom Kodesh, I would have known it's talking about the Beis HaMikdash itself, not just Kodesh HaKadoshim. Rabbi Yehuda, my time, okay, fine. What's the logic of Rabbi Yehuda? He says very simple. If you follow the Rabban, what? That you get misa as soon as you walk in Hashidashim. So why mention Aaron? You don't need it. But I mean, I would say, the base la parecha the misa el pnei hakapoides meboya. If the base la pareches you get misa, then pnei hakapoides, you don't have to tell me that. Surely pnei hakapoides are standing by the Aaron. El Pnei HaKapoid, why mention it all? Shemamina come tell you El Pnei HaKapoid has been misa. When do you get misa? Only if your Pnei HaKapoid is standing by the Oren. But if you're standing in the Kodesh Kedoshim, but not by the Oren, is merely as hard as merely an Avera, merely a lav lashes. But Rabbanon, what are they going to say? Good point. Hachinami, the Lord said, you're right. There was no need to mention standing by the Aron because we hold that as soon as you walk into Kodesh Kedoshim, you chay misa. So why mention the Aron at all? Tell you that only if you went in the normal way, you went in through the curtain and you went straight in, so you passed you went in Kodesh Kedoshim, and then you went to the Aron. But if you came in through this, as Rashi said, you dug a hole on the side wall from the north side or the south side, or if you walked in the room, but you went along the wall to get to the Aron instead of the direct line, or if you came down through the skylight, in all of these cases, you're not chayiv misa. That's why it says and then the next one to tell you that only if you walk in the normal way. Tells you in every place. You have to go the normal way to the east side. But Rabbi Yehuda. Leimakra Pnei. Rabbi Yehuda says you're right, and I also know from that pasuk that Pnei means you have to come in from the door, which is the curtain, which is on the east side. You're walking toward the west. But my issue here, how I know my way, is my El. Why does it say El? Pnei it's El Kapoidus Shmamina. You know why it says that? It says it says El Pnei HaKapodos. Because it just say Pnei HaKapodos. Say me base the Pareiches Pnei HaKapodos. I'll know it means going through the front gate, through the front curtain, straight to the Aron. Why does it say El Pnei El? What's the El? Shmamana El Dafka. El means that this is the only situation where you are Chayiv Misa if you're standing Pnei HaKapodos by the Aron. And the Rabban El Lav Dafka. So what's that to do with our whole situation over here? So now we go back to the Paraduma. Rabbi Yehuda, the Amad El Pnei HaKapodos, Rabbi Yehuda said the word El means dafke. So when it says by Paraduma in the Torah, he's a El Noichach, I want you to spray towards the base. I mean, use the word El dafke. And therefore, if he didn't, it's not a kosher Paraduma. But Rabbanon who say that El doesn't really mean that it has to be done this way. But the Hasam Lav Dafka, since over here, it El by Yom Kippur or walking into the base of Midrash Kodesh Kedoshim, El doesn't mean that's the only time you're Chayiv Misa standing by the Aron. Even if you walk in the Kodesh Kedoshim Chayiv, then Hachinam Lav Dafka here, even though it says El by the Paraduma, it's El Pnei, it's Lav Dafka. It's Lav Dafka. Which is El Noichach. Maskal Rabbi Yosef asked the question. According to Rabbi Yehuda, whenever it says El, it means this is how it has to be. So by part of them, it has to be in that direction. Is Nami Dafka? And asked the question. So the Migdash Sheni Lavar Kapoda is Hachanam La'avid Hazois. So what about the second base of Migdash? El means that has to be. It says that you should spray by paraduma. You should spray towards the oil might. But if you're telling me that, and it has to be all this, all the things there. So you're telling me that that al, according to Rabbi Yehuda, means dafke. This is how it has to be. So what about in the second base Hamikdash when it says that it's in Yom Kippur? You have to spray on Pnei HaKapaydes. Now, L'chayda, there's no Aron there. According to you, El means Dafka if there's an Aron there. Can't be like the Rabbanos say El Lav Dafka. So just spray it in the direction of the Aron. Doesn't have to be an Aron there. But you're saying according to you, the El means Dafka. So on Yom Kippur, when you have to spray Dafka with his Aron. And we know that in the second base Hamikdash they sprayed Yom Kippur, and yet there was no Aron there. How can that work? Says the Gemara, the Chipper, it says in the Pasuk, the Chipper is Migdash HaKodesh. What do you mean Chipper is Migdash HaKodesh? It means the place where it's Kodesh does the Kapar. Mokum HaMakudesh LaKodesh, where the Aron was supposed to be, and that's the direction you spray, and it does its job. So that's how we answer the two brises. One place that said that if you don't spray in the right direction, the paradum is possible. And the other one says even if you don't spray in the right direction, the paradum is kosher. So he said it's a machlekes chachamim. If El, when it says you have to spray El noichach pnei oil mayed is dafka and otherwise not yetzer, or it's lav dafka. Comes when Rambam says no, easier. Hava har rabbanon. It's all the rabbanon, but the koi mizrach hamaydiv here is talking about that you're standing from the Mizrach. And it might have, then this is the way you're supposed to do it, va'adin, you spray it. So even though it's not mamish directly, to the curtain, let's say you're a little bit to the side, it's good enough, because more or less it's good enough. When it says v'hadak tani psulas, when it says pasul, the koit soften v'dodim, you're standing on the wrong side, north-south, which is not the right direction completely. That's when it's pasul. We'll go to the Mishnah. We learned Shebefnim. We said Shebefnim that for the carbon that done inside. If he did not have in mind lishman, sulus. It is possible because they're called a chatas. But shaloi mechavanas. But if he did not spray it in the right direction, kshay is a kosher. Says the Gemara Batanul elsewhere. Bein shaloi lishman. Bein shaloi lishman. That if he did loi lishman, it's also kosher. We have a different stira. By Mitzvah, it says clearly if he did it Loi Lishman, it is kosher. And the first bright, and here before we said that in this other bright said that if he did it Loi Lishman, it is not kosher. So which one is it? Says the Gemara. Remember, we had in beginning Marazvachim. We know that according to Chatas, he did it Loi Lishman, didn't have the right things in mind. It is possible. But we had a mach, and all of the kabbalas is kosher, except the balabas is not yotze to their obligation. We had a machlekes regarding a carbon asham. Rabbi Lezer says it says in pasuk achatas ka asham. Asham has the same status as a chatas. If he did not do it lishmon, it is possible. And the chacham say it is all right. And this is the machlekes of these two brises. Har Rabbi Lezer, har Rabban. Rabbi Lezer, the makish asham lechatas. Rabbi Lezer says generally an asham is compared to a chatas. So therefore, by a mitzvah, carbon asham is possible shalei lishmon. And therefore, furthermore, makish nami loig la'asham. So we'll also make a heck. We'll compare the loig of oil to the asham that you have to spray it in the right direction. Just like the carbon asham, you have to do it in a certain way. So too, the loig has to be like an asham. If you don't do loig l'shma, not the sorry. If you did loig l'shma, it is possible. Why? Because we're going to, just like we compare asham to chatas, we're going to compare the loig of the asham to the asham itself. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan don't compare the two. Even according to Rabbi Lezer, we already had this whole issue in Masechtas Vachim that if something is merely a derivative of something else, it cannot then teach on a third party. So the idea that an asham shaloi lishma is possibly learned in a hekesh equation to chatas. Then you want to take that din and carry it further to a loig and say the loig that goes with the asham is compared to the asham. You can't do that. Rabbi said, I'll tell you how to reconcile two brises. So how come one brise says loy l'shmoy by a mitzvah by b'fnim it's possible one says kosher? No problem. Depends on what we mean. Kan lahachshe kan lahachis. When we say it's kosher means the carbon is kosher. When we say that's possible means but you were not yoytze, you didn't appease the Eibush that you were not yoytze with this carbon. So all the Bailam Shem Chayva. We'll pause for 1 minute and we'll